The night sky above Earth was calm, filled with stars that had shined for millions of years. To most people, they were only distant lights, beautiful to watch but unreachable. For Myra, they were not just lights. She saw them as voices waiting to be heard. She worked as a researcher in a small observatory far from the busy cities. Her task was simple: listen to the universe. One quiet evening, as the wind moved across the tall grass outside the observatory, Myra sat in front of the wide screen filled with endless waves of static. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. Something unusual repeated within the noise. It was faint, almost like a heartbeat hidden under layers of sound. She wrote down the sequence, then played it again and again. "Paul, come here," she called. Paul, a quiet man who preferred logic over dreams, walked into the room carrying a notebook. "What is it this time?" Another burst from a distant star. Myra shook her head. "No, this is different. Look at the pattern. It repeats with precision, not like random energy." Paul adjusted his glasses and studied the lines on the screen. His brow furrowed. "This looks intentional. Almost like a message." At that moment, Darren entered, wiping his hands with a cloth. He was the engineer who kept their old equipment running when funding was too low for replacements. "You both look as if you found treasure," he said. Myra turned to him, excitement in her eyes. "Maybe we did. I think this is a signal. Not a natural one." Darren chuckled but then noticed how serious Paul looked. He stepped closer and frowned at the screen. The repeating pulse was clear, steady, and not something nature made by accident. The three of them worked through the night. They checked if it came from Earth satellites or human machines, but nothing matched. The frequency was older than any technology they had. It carried a structure, almost like a song made of numbers. As dawn approached, Myra finally leaned back. "This is a call for help. I can feel it." Paul did not answer right away. He was careful with his words. "We should not jump to conclusions, but I agree this is no ordinary signal. Whoever sent it was advanced." Darren rubbed his chin. "But why can we hear it? Shouldn't their message be for others like them, not for us?" The question hung heavy in the room. The signal was not powerful, almost as if it was never meant for human receivers. Yet, somehow, Earth had caught it. In the days that followed, they sent their findings to higher authorities. Most governments dismissed it. Some said it was only background noise, others claimed it was natural radiation. A few scientists outside their circle laughed at the idea of an alien message. But Myra did not give up. She kept listening, and the more she studied the signal, the more she believed it was a cry. It spoke of danger, of something spreading through the stars. The pattern was not only numbers but also maps. She noticed shapes that looked like constellations, guiding anyone who listened toward a distant cluster of stars. One evening, Paul asked her, "Why do you push so hard when no one believes us?" Myra's answer was calm. "Because if someone is asking for help, we cannot stay silent. Even if the message was never meant for us, we have a choice. We can answer." Darren agreed with her, though he still had doubts. "We are not ready for this. Our ships cannot travel so far. We don't even know what waits for us out there." "That is true," Myra replied. "But think about it. If others once lived among the stars and sent this cry, maybe they are gone now. If no one answers, their last hope will die." Her words struck both men. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the hum of the machines filling the air. The signal kept playing in the background, steady and haunting. It had crossed endless light years to reach them. It was never designed for human ears, but humans were listening now. Paul finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Then we must find a way. If the galaxy is crying, then perhaps we are the ones who must answer. From that moment, the three of them knew their lives had changed. The observatory was no longer just a workplace. It had become the point where humanity touched the unknown. The world outside remained unaware, busy with its daily struggles. Yet above the noise of human life, the stars whispered, carrying a secret that had waited for ages. And on a small blue planet, 3 humans had heard it. They did not know how far the signal would take them, or what dangers lay beyond their reach. But one truth was clear. The galaxy's cry had found them, and they would not turn away. The signal did not stop. Every night, when the stars appeared, the same steady rhythm returned, as if the universe itself repeated the message. For Myra, Paul, and Darren, it was no longer just sound. It had become a voice calling to them. Inside the observatory, the three worked without rest. Charts covered the walls, papers filled with symbols and numbers. The computers, old and noisy, processed endless streams of data. Darren repaired wires daily, keeping the machines alive. Myra listened to the smallest details of the signal, while Paul compared it with known star maps. One evening, Myra pointed at the screen. "See this part? It repeats differently than the rest. I think it shows a location." Paul leaned closer. He had been staring at maps for hours, but now his eyes widened. "You may be right. This matches a star cluster beyond our nearest systems." Darren frowned. "So whoever sent this wants someone to go there. But why? What waits for us in that place?" Myra's voice softened. "I believe it is danger. Listen to this section. It rises and falls, almost like a warning tone. I think they are telling us something is coming." The more they studied, the clearer the message became. It was not simply words, but a mixture of maps, warnings, and requests for aid. Myra compared it to a desperate letter thrown into the ocean, hoping anyone could find it. When they tried to share their findings, officials still ignored them. A government panel told them, "This is beyond our concern. Earth has problems of its own." Some scientists said it was fantasy. Yet the signal remained, too clear to dismiss. Darren grew restless. "If no one listens, what can we do? We are only 3 people with broken machines." Myra answered with steady resolve. "We can keep decoding. We can prepare. If no one else cares, then we will." Paul supported her. "Even if we cannot travel there now, we can still learn. Knowledge is a weapon. Someday, Earth may need it." Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the team unraveled more pieces of the message. They discovered signs that described enemies unlike anything humanity had faced. Great machines that moved through the galaxy, feeding on stars, leaving worlds lifeless. The message spoke of civilizations that once stood against them but had fallen silent. Darren whispered one night, "If this is true, then the galaxy is dying." Paul replied firmly, "Then perhaps we were meant to hear this, even if by accident." Myra shook her head. "No, this was never meant for us. The power of the signal, the design of the code, it was created for minds far older, far stronger than ours. But those minds are gone. That is why we must act." The 3 of them made a secret decision. If Earth would not answer, they would gather people who believed. Engineers, scientists, dreamers, anyone willing to help. They began sending quiet messages to universities and space agencies, asking for volunteers. Some laughed, but a few curious minds responded. Soon, a small network grew. It was fragile, scattered, and without funding, but it carried hope. Together, they began to plan something unthinkable, the building of a ship capable of reaching the stars shown in the message. Darren worked day and night designing simple but strong systems. "We cannot create massive warships like in stories," he explained. "But we can build something that carries us forward. Something that says we will not stay silent." Paul focused on strategy. He mapped possible routes, calculated fuel needs, and studied old rocket designs. He often said, "The journey itself will be our greatest test. If we can cross even one star, the rest will follow." Myra carried the heaviest task, keeping the team united. She spoke often of duty. "The galaxy may not know us, but that does not matter. A voice cried for help, and we answered. That is who we are." Each night, as they worked, the signal continued to hum in the background, like a heartbeat guiding them. One night, Darren asked a question that had been growing inside him. "Myra, what if we reach them and fail? What if we are too weak?" She looked at him with calm determination. "Then at least we will know that humans tried. We will not be remembered as silent watchers. We will be remembered as those who stood up." Paul nodded. "Strength is not only in weapons. It is in courage. And humanity has that." Their plans remained secret from most of the world, but within the observatory, hope burned bright. The message that was never meant for humans had found them. They could not change that truth. They could only decide what to do with it. The decision was made. They would build, they would travel, and they would answer. As the stars shined above Earth, the team looked up with new eyes. The universe was no longer a distant dream. It was a challenge, a call, a cry for help. And humanity, uninvited and unexpected, was preparing to step forward. The plan to answer the signal was no longer just an idea. It became a goal that filled every day and every night. Myra, Paul, and Darren worked with their growing circle of helpers. Some were engineers who had retired but still carried brilliant minds. Some were young students who dreamed of reaching the stars. Together, they formed a hidden community bound by the same belief that humanity must answer the galaxy's cry. The first challenge was clear: build a ship that could cross the distance. Earth had rockets, but they were built for short journeys. The moon and the planets nearby had been touched, but never the stars beyond. To reach the location in the signal, they needed something different. Darren took the lead in design. He drew on scraps of knowledge from physics, astronomy, and engineering. "We cannot create a perfect ship," he explained to the group. "But we can build something that survives long enough to take us there." The ship would not be large. It would carry only a small crew, supplies for survival, and the equipment needed to listen to the signal. Every part had to be simple but strong. Darren's hands grew tired as he sketched designs night after night, yet his eyes never lost focus. Paul's task was no less difficult. He studied the path ahead, tracing the routes of stars, calculating how much energy was needed, and finding ways to save every drop of fuel. He reminded the team often, "We are not racing. We are surviving. Every decision must give us a chance to last longer in space." Myra took on the role of leader, though she never asked for the title. She carried the message in her heart and reminded the others why they worked. When doubts rose, her words steadied them. "Remember the signal," she said. "Remember the cry. We are not only building a machine. We are building hope." Months passed. The world outside remained unaware. Governments focused on politics, people continued with their lives, and no one noticed the small community hidden in the shadows of science. But inside workshops and abandoned warehouses, parts of the ship slowly came together. Metal frames, engines adapted from old designs, and panels shaped by hand began to form something new. One evening, as sparks flew from Darren's tools, Paul stood watching the frame of the ship. His voice was quiet but filled with awe. "Do you realize what this means? This is not only a ship. This is our step into the stars." Darren looked up, sweat on his brow. "It is fragile. One mistake and it could fail." "Fragile, yes," Paul agreed, "but it exists. That makes it stronger than silence." The day came when the ship stood complete. It was not polished like the vessels of science fiction. It looked raw, with rough edges and patched surfaces. but it was real. They named it Answer, for that was its purpose. When the group gathered around the finished ship, Myra placed her hand on the metal surface. "This is our voice. Through this ship, humanity will speak." Volunteers stepped forward to join the mission, but in the end, the first crew was clear. Paul would serve as commander, guiding them through the unknown. Darren would be the engineer, keeping the fragile vessel alive. Myra would manage communications, decoding the signal further and sending back reports to Earth. The launch day arrived in silence. There were no great crowds, no banners, no governments watching with pride. Only the small group who had built the ship stood by. The sky was clear, the air cool, and the ground shook as engines roared to life. Paul's voice carried through the communicator. "For Earth, for the signal, for the future." The Answer lifted slowly, fire streaming below it, until it broke free from the ground. Higher and higher it climbed, leaving the blue sky behind. Then it was gone, swallowed by the black sea of space. Inside, the crew sat strapped in, their hearts racing. Darren checked the panels nervously, muttering to himself. Myra kept her eyes on the signal monitor, the steady hum reminding her of why they were there. Paul looked out at the stars, his hand steady on the controls. Earth grew smaller behind them, a blue sphere fading in the distance. Ahead lay silence, darkness, and the unknown. Yet within that silence was a path, drawn by the message they had chosen to follow. For days, the ship traveled smoothly. The crew adjusted to life in the narrow space. They ate carefully measured meals, took turns resting, and checked every system again and again. Each night, Myra replayed the signal. The sound filled the cabin, reminding them of their purpose. One evening, Darren asked, "Do you think anyone out there knows we are coming?" Myra answered softly, "Maybe not. But they will know soon." The cry was not meant for us, but we answered. That is enough. Paul added with quiet strength, "And if we are the only ones left to answer, then humanity will stand where others have fallen." The ship pressed forward into the vast ocean of stars. It was small, weak, and untested. Yet it carried something greater than technology. It carried the will of a species that refused to ignore the call of the galaxy. The first step had been taken. Humanity had left the safety of home, not to conquer, but to help. The stars no longer looked like distant lights. They were now a road, and the Answer was the first traveler. The Answer sailed through the deep silence of space, following the star map hidden within the signal. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The small crew of Myra, Paul, and Darren learned to live inside the narrow ship. They measured every drop of water, every grain of food, and checked every wire twice. Life was difficult, but their spirits remained strong because the signal still pulsed in the background, steady and alive, like a guide leading them forward. Then, one day, the map pointed them toward a dim system at the edge of a star cluster. As the ship approached, Myra's screen lit up with strange new readings. Shapes appeared against the blackness, ruins of vast ships drifting in silence. Some were torn apart, others were broken into pieces, floating without life. Paul's voice was low. "This is not just wreckage. These were cities in space." The crew stared in silence. The remains stretched for thousands of kilometers, silent monuments of a fallen people. Darren's hands tightened on the controls. If this is what waits for us, then the warning was real. Suddenly, the signal they had followed for so long shifted. Myra adjusted her equipment, her heart racing. "It is close. It is here." Moments later, lights appeared between the wreckage. Small vessels, rough and patched, emerged carefully. They were alive, not ruins. The humans watched as the ship surrounded them, cautious and silent. A new voice crackled through their speakers. It was deep and heavy, filled with suspicion. "Identify yourselves." Paul straightened. "This is the vessel Answer from Earth. We followed the call. There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, sharper now. Earth. That name is unknown. You are not the ones we called. Myra leaned forward. We know. The message was not meant for us, but we heard it. We came. The voice did not reply right away. The alien ships guided the answer toward a hidden station built inside the remains of a great ship. When the humans docked, they stepped out carefully. For the first time, they saw the senders of the signal or what was left of them. Tall figures with pale skin and long arms, their faces marked with faint lines that glowed softly. Their eyes carried both wisdom and sorrow. They called themselves the Thaler. One of the Thaler leaders, a figure named Aaron, looked at the humans with disbelief. You are fragile. Your ship is small. Why would your kind answer a cry that even the great empires ignored? Paul stood tall. Because someone had to. You called for help, and silence answered. We could not allow that silence to continue. The Thaler exchanged uncertain glances. They were a broken people, survivors of great cities destroyed by the machines that fed on stars. For centuries they had hidden, waiting, sending their signal into the void. But never had they expected humans small, untested, and unknown to arrive. Darren looked around the station. It was patched together with pieces of wreckage, powered by weak generators, barely holding life. He whispered to Myra, "They are dying." Myra nodded, her heart heavy. She stepped forward and spoke to Aaron. Your message reached us, and though we are not the ones you expected, we are here. Tell us what happened. Tell us why you called. Aaron studied her, then slowly nodded. Very well. You have earned the truth. The Thaler gathered the humans in a hall filled with old machines and broken screens. They told their story. Once, the Thaler had built shining cities among the stars. Their fleets stretched across the galaxy. They were not alone, other races had thrived as well. But then came the machines, cold and endless. They devoured stars, stripping life from systems. Armies fought but fell, one after another. The Thaler's greatest weapons could only slow the destruction. Finally, their empire crumbled, and only fragments survived. Myra listened with sorrow. And so you sent the signal. Aaron lowered his head. Yes. We hoped the old allies would hear, but none answered. Perhaps they are gone as well. We did not expect humans. Paul's voice was firm. Yet we came. Do not dismiss us because we are small. Strength is not always measured in size. Some of the Thaler remained doubtful. One of them whispered, they are weak. Their ship cannot face the machines. But another, an elder with dim glowing eyes, spoke softly. Perhaps weakness is not the same as failure. Once, we too were small. The humans spent days among the Thaler, learning and listening. They saw the despair in the alien eyes, the exhaustion of those who had lost everything. And yet, for the first time in many years, a spark of hope began to return. These fragile humans had come not with great fleets but with determination. One evening, Myra stood outside the viewing window of the station, looking at the endless stars. Aaron joined her. Do you truly believe you can face what destroyed us? She turned to him, her voice calm but strong. Maybe we cannot fight as you once did. But we will not run. We will not stay silent. That is what makes us human. Aaron studied her words, and for the first time, he allowed himself a small smile. Then perhaps the galaxy has not forgotten how to hope. The Thaler were not ready to follow humans yet. Doubt remained, fear held them still. But the seed was planted. For the first time in ages, someone had answered their cry. Humanity, uninvited and unexpected, had stepped into their lives. And the galaxy, though broken and wounded, began to listen once again. The humans stayed among the Thaler for many weeks. At first, The aliens treated them as curious guests, not as partners. The Thaler had seen mighty empires fall, so it was hard for them to believe that a small group of humans in a fragile ship could make any difference. Yet every day, Myra, Paul, and Darren showed something the Thaler had not seen in a long time: hope mixed with action. One morning, Darren walked through the wreckage of the old Thaler station. He studied broken machines and piles of unused scrap. Most Thaler saw junk, reminders of a lost age. Darren saw possibility. With sparks from his tools and ideas drawn on paper, he began to rebuild. A group of Thaler watched him with confusion. "Why are you wasting time with dead metal?" one of them asked. Darren smiled. "Dead metal can still serve. You just have to look at it differently." By the end of the day, he had built a small defense system using only spare wires, old parts, and the station's failing energy cells. It was not powerful, but it worked. The Thaler were surprised. "We would never have thought of this," one admitted. "That is the human way," Darren replied. "We make do with what we have. We improvise." Meanwhile, Myra worked with the Thaler scientists. She spent long hours studying fragments of enemy machine code that the Thaler had collected. Most of the aliens had given up on it, believing it too complex to break. But Myra's mind was patient. She noticed patterns others had missed. Slowly, she built a method to disrupt the machine's signals. One evening, she showed her progress to Aaron. "Look here. When I send this sequence, the machines lose balance for a moment. It is small, but it is a weakness." Aaron stared in disbelief. "You found this with only your human tools?" Myra nodded. "Yes. You see defeat. I see puzzles waiting to be solved." Aaron said nothing more, but his respect for the humans began to grow. Paul, on the other hand, worked not with machines but with hearts. He walked among the Thaler, listening to their stories. Many spoke of lost families, burned worlds, and endless fear. Their voices were heavy with despair. Paul never dismissed their pain, but he reminded them of something greater. "You are still here," he said. "You have survived when others did not. That means something. And now, you are not alone. We came because your cry reached us. Together, we can stand again." At first, the Thaler shook their heads. They had heard words before. But Paul's voice carried warmth, and his actions matched his promises. He worked beside them, carried supplies, and shared meals. Slowly, the Thaler began to listen. One night, the humans gathered with Aaron and the Thaler Council. A large map of the galaxy glowed in the room, showing systems lost to the star-consuming machines. Red marks spread like fire across the stars. Aaron pointed to one system. "The machines will pass here soon. It holds nothing of value now, only empty stations. We will abandon it as we have abandoned many before." Paul shook his head. "No. That system is not empty. It has rocks, metals, and fields of asteroids. We can use them." The Thaler frowned. "Use them? Against the machines?" Darren leaned forward, his eyes bright. "Yes. With simple tricks. We can turn asteroids into traps. We cannot match their power, but we can make the battlefield dangerous." Myra added, "And if my code works, we can create confusion among them. Even a small delay could save lives." The council hesitated. Their instincts told them to flee, as they always had. But the humans spoke with such certainty, with such burning determination, that the Thaler could not ignore them. Finally, Aaron said, "If we fight and fail, more of us will die." Paul answered, "If you keep running, all of you will die. Fighting gives us a chance. And humans always fight for a chance." The room fell silent. Then the elder Thaler, the one with dim glowing eyes, spoke. "Perhaps the humans are right. Let us try their way." So plans were made. Darren taught groups of Thaler how to build hidden weapons from scraps. Myra shared her codes, training them to send false signals that could confuse the machines. Paul worked to organize crews, mixing humans and Thaler side by side. The change was slow but real. Where there had been despair, there was now movement. Where there had been silence, there was now planning. For the first time in years, the Thaler prepared not to flee but to stand. One evening, as the humans rested, Darren looked out at the stars. "Do you think this will work?" Myra smiled gently. "It does not matter if it works perfectly. What matters is that we are trying. That is what gives others courage." Paul placed his hand on the cold metal wall of the station. "We are showing them humanity's way. Not with power, not with great fleets, but with spirit, creativity, and unity. That is what makes us strong." Outside, the stars shined quietly. Somewhere beyond, the machines moved closer, hungering for more light. But for the first time, the galaxy had something new waiting for them, humans who refused to be silent. The star-consuming machines had arrived. From the edge of the system, massive shadows moved across the stars, swallowing light and heat. Their engines hummed with power, cold and endless. For centuries, civilizations had feared them, and now, they approached the remnants of the Thaler home system. Inside the station, the humans and Thaler prepared. Darren moved quickly, checking improvised defenses. Small asteroids had been set on paths to act as traps. Explosive charges lined hidden corners. Myra double-checked her code, ready to confuse the machine's systems. Paul stood before the crews, human and Thaler side by side, and spoke with calm authority. "Today, we fight not because we are strong," he said, "but because we are determined. Today, we stand so that life can continue. No matter what happens, we will show that we will not stay silent." The Thaler, weary from centuries of loss, stared at him. Doubt and fear filled their eyes. But when Paul and the humans took the first steps forward, they felt something they had not felt in years: hope. Outside, the machines moved closer. Their great metal bodies reflected the faint light of distant stars. Their presence alone caused fear to ripple across the station. Yet, humans and Thaler did not move backward. They had planned, they had built, and they had trained. The first strike was unexpected. Small asteroids, guided along precise paths, struck the machine's legs and engines. Sparks flew as metal screeched against metal. The machines, unaccustomed to irregular attacks, slowed in confusion. Darren smiled. It worked. The traps worked. Myra sent out her code sequences, each one a subtle signal designed to mislead the machines. For a moment, they froze, their sensors unable to distinguish real threats from false ones. The humans watched as the gap grew, giving the station and its defenders precious time. But the machines were relentless. Their numbers were vast, and their power unmatched. One by one, they adapted to the humans' tricks. A cold shadow passed over the station as one massive machine moved toward the human crews. Its metal limbs reached like giants, and its engines burned brighter than a small sun. Paul signaled the crews. "Hold your positions. Keep the traps coming. Keep moving." The Thaler, inspired by the humans, fought with everything they had. They launched small vessels at the machines, using hit-and-run tactics taught by the humans. Explosions lit the darkness as courage met cold, endless force. In the chaos, humans made small sacrifices. A pilot guided her ship into a path to block the machine from reaching a cluster of asteroids. Another crew member manually triggered a chain of charges to protect the station. Every action, no matter how small, slowed the advance of the machines. Darren shouted from the control room, "Myra! Now! Send a new code." Myra's fingers moved quickly across her panel. Sequences of signals spread across the system. The machine stuttered, faltered, and shifted. One of them toppled, crashing into a nearby asteroid field. The Thaler watched in awe. The humans, they are small, but they think differently. They see what we cannot. Paul nodded. That is humanity's way. We do not always have the strongest weapons, but we never stop trying. Hours passed. The station shook from impacts. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and alarms blared. Yet the humans and Thaler kept working together. They repaired defenses, guided vessels, and adjusted codes. Every mistake was corrected, every moment used. By the end of the day, the machines had been slowed enough to retreat temporarily. Some were damaged beyond immediate repair. The station still stood, battered but alive. The crews were exhausted, but their spirits were unbroken. Aaron, the Thaler leader, approached Myra, Paul, and Darren. I did not believe small humans could make such a difference. Yet here you stand, alive, with machines retreating. You have shown us something we thought lost long ago. Myra smiled softly. We did not come here to prove strength. We came because we heard a cry. And when you are willing to fight together, hope grows even in darkness. Paul looked out at the stars, many still untouched, many still threatened. This is only the beginning. But today, we have stood. Today, we have shown that life matters, even against impossible odds. The Thaler began to see it too. For centuries, they had fled, hidden, and waited for a miracle. Now, they realized that the miracle had walked among them, small and human, but unstoppable in spirit. The galaxy had not forgotten them entirely. A new voice had joined the chorus. Humanity had answered the cry. And for the first time in centuries, the stars beyond the Thaler system shone with hope. The battle had ended, but the work was far from over. The machines that consumed stars had retreated, but their presence was still a shadow across the galaxy. Myra, Paul, and Darren stood among the Thaler, weary but proud. The station was battered, sparks flew from broken consoles, and alarms still echoed faintly. Yet, the humans had proven that courage, creativity, and determination could matter, even in the face of unimaginable power. Aaron, the Thaler leader, walked with them through the station. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now shone with a new light. You have shown us that strength is not only in weapons or fleets, he said. It is in spirit, in will, and in courage. Humans, you have given us hope again. Myra smiled. You taught us much as well. We have learned to see, to understand, and to work together. Today, humans are stronger because of the Thaler, and the Thaler are stronger because of humans. Paul added, the galaxy is listening. If life wants to survive, it must stand together. We are only one small step, but the echo of that step can reach far beyond us. The Thaler began to move. They repaired their vessels, activated old defenses, and prepared to reclaim systems lost to the machines. The humans guided them, teaching methods that relied on cleverness, teamwork, and innovation rather than raw power. Together, they turned simple materials into tools of survival. The Thaler had never seen this kind of determination before, and it inspired them deeply. Darren walked among the workshops, overseeing repairs. It is incredible what they can do when they believe in something, he said quietly to Myra. Myra nodded. Belief and action together can change what seems impossible. That is what we humans bring. As weeks passed, other civilizations began to notice. Scattered species that had hidden from the machines saw the human success. They saw that a small, fragile species from a distant planet could stand where mighty empires had fallen. Inspired, these civilizations slowly began to rise from hiding. Small fleets formed, alliances built, and communication networks spread. The galaxy, long silent, began to answer back. Paul watched a group of alien leaders send messages to one another, carefully planning defenses. Look at that, he said. They are responding. They have hope now because we acted. One voice can start a chorus. Myra felt a deep satisfaction. The galaxy's cry had reached Earth by accident, yet humanity had chosen to answer. It was not the strength of their ships or weapons that mattered most. It was their willingness to act, their refusal to remain silent, and their courage to stand for something greater than themselves. One night, as the Answer sailed alongside repaired Thaler vessels, Myra, Paul, and Darren looked at the stars. Each point of light reminded them of systems still at risk, worlds still in danger. But for the first time, they did not feel hopeless. They had started a change that could ripple across the galaxy. Aaron joined them on the bridge. "Humans," he said, "your kind came when we thought no one would. You reminded us that even the smallest voice can be heard. You are not only our allies. You are our example." Myra shook her head gently. "No. We are only one part. The galaxy itself is responding. It is everyone who chooses to act who matters. We just had the courage to take the first step." Darren smiled, pointing to a distant star system. "And the first step has begun. Others are listening now. Others will rise. We may be small, but our choices echo far." In the following months, messages spread across the galaxy. Systems once abandoned began to rebuild. New fleets were formed, combining species that had never spoken before. Communication networks, repair stations, and supply hubs grew, all inspired by the courage of 3 humans who answered a call that was never meant for them. Paul looked at Myra and Darren. "We came to answer a cry, and in doing so, we have shown that life is worth defending. The galaxy now knows that someone will always answer, even if unexpected." Myra nodded. "And that is how change begins. One step, one act of courage, and everything can grow from there." As they looked out at the stars, the humans realized that their journey had only begun. They had answered a cry, inspired hope, and united species that had lost faith. The galaxy had listened and begun to act. Far beyond Earth, across countless light years, the message of hope spread. Humanity, small and untested, had chosen to answer the impossible. And the stars, once silent witnesses, now shone with the knowledge that life would not be silenced. The galaxy's cry had been heard. And for the first time, it had an answer. Myra, Paul, and Darren stood together, watching the stars. They had begun something greater than themselves. Humanity had shown that even the smallest voice could change the universe.